Most marathon runners ruin their race in the taper. After countless miles, they spend the last 3 weeks trying to do too much or too little, getting in their own head and making mistakes that undo months of hard work. I've been racing for over 20 years, have run a 2:15 marathon and have coached athletes at every level. Here's what actually works. So the question I get asked most is, how long should the taper be? And I'll start with the assumption that you've had a normal 12 to 16 week training block, and at the end I'll talk about when I would deviate from this standard taper. Ideally, we're looking for a taper around 2.5 to 3 weeks. I generally like to get a normal session done midweek, about 2.5 weeks out, although this definitely shouldn't be a step up from what you've previously been doing in your training block. For example, a common structure that I use when coaching athletes is Wednesday will be a 10k half marathon type session and Saturday will be the marathon style long run. If we've been maxing out around 12k of volume on that Wednesday, we'll keep it there, but make sure the session is split in a way that isn't harder than what we've been doing previously, and most importantly, split in a way that maximises confidence. So for example, if we're doing a session like 1k, 2k, 3k, 3k, 2k, 1k in the middle of the block, we could maybe switch this to 2x3k, 2x2k, 2x1k when we're 2.5 weeks out. So we're still getting the same volume, but we're just splitting it up in a way that's a bit easier. And then the weekend long run 2 weeks out is when we'll really start to bring that volume back a noticeable amount. Generally, I find it's best to get your freshness from a reduction in volume while maintaining intensity, which stops you getting to the race feeling flat. What does this volume reduction actually look like in practice though? Well, the week beginning 3 weeks out, I think it's best if this week just starts as normal, with the easy days on Monday and Tuesday, and also that session on the Wednesday staying the same. Then we'll start to cut stuff very gradually. Maybe instead of doing a 12k easy run on Thursday, we could do a 10k easy run. But generally, we're looking for most of the volume reduction in this week to come from the reduction in the long run. And that, for example, could drop from 30k to 24 or 25k. And it's the following week, so 2 weeks out, where I have a more strict volume cap on the mileage. And here, I'm usually looking for people to max out no more than 70% of their peak week. So for example, if you've maxed out at 100k in the marathon block, you'll be running no more than 70k in the week before race week. The mistake people make here though is they think, okay, well, I'll just cut every run to 70% of what I've usually been doing. And I don't think that works, because Monday of that week is 13 days before the race, and Sunday of that week is 7 days before the race. It's a massive difference. So personally, I would do something like keep some running at the start of the week, similar to what you've been doing. Maybe if you always do a 10k easy on a Monday, just keep that there. But your 10k easy on the Sunday could be 6k, and you're losing mileage like that. And then when it comes to the harder days, the Wednesday, for example, could be cut from 12k to 8k, and the long run could be dropped to 20k at most. A key thing that people miss here: do not use your newfound freshness to run super fast on your easy days. After a long period of marathon training, your legs probably will feel pretty good, but if you then suddenly go and start running 30 seconds per k quicker than you would usually run, then that's definitely going to be an increase in intensity, even if it feels fine. And this isn't me telling you to keep everything at the same pace. You naturally probably will run a little quicker, but that's okay, as long as we're not actually like pushing into close to marathon pace. We want to maintain intensity levels, not increase them. And then once we get into that final week, it's time to land the plane nice and gradually, potentially keeping a decent run on the Monday instead of your usual 10k, going for 8k, and then doing 15 minutes to 25 minutes of relaxed threshold work on the Wednesday before really shutting it down in the last 3 days. With this final week, it can be very individualised, and it's just about what gets you to the start line as happy and as confident as possible. Some people like running 20 minutes the day before the race, some people don't. Some people prefer to do quicker strides towards the end of the week, and some people want to just do as little as they can get away with. I've always found that whatever you think works for you is probably best, and something I like to tell anyone who'll listen is that if you've done a really good 12 to 16 week block, whether you do a 20-minute shakeout on the Friday or a 15-minute shakeout on the Saturday, it's not going to make any difference to your result. So don't overthink it. make your decision, preferably with your coach, and stick to it. Finally, on that final few days, trust the training that got you to the start line. You've probably been smashing great long runs when you've been at full mileage or you haven't had the perfect dinner the night before. So just remember that. Remember that you don't need the stars to align to achieve your goal. And if you do, you might have to adjust your goal. The only time that I would ever bring the marathon taper back to 2 weeks or even 10 days is if you've had a bit of a shorter training block, whether this be that you were a bit injured at the start of it or you were coming off another marathon that was a little too close to get the full 12 to 16 weeks. And the two reasons why I think a shorter taper works here is, one, it just gives you an extra week to get another long run in when you've probably not quite had enough yet, and two, you don't really need to recover quite so much because you're not bringing in 12 to 16 weeks of fatigue into the taper, you're only bringing 6 to 8 weeks, so you'll freshen up a lot quicker. When it comes to the mental side of all of this, the taper really does have a funny way of playing tricks on you. Even now, if I'm only tapering for a B race, I'm constantly thinking, how do I feel? How are my legs? How's my breathing? And the answer always is bad, because you're never thinking about these things when you're in full training, and when you start to give them attention and focus on them, you notice them more. So of course they're going to feel bad. For me especially, this mental struggle always presents itself in the final session. I'll usually do 4 by 3 minutes at threshold before the marathon, and I struggle to hit these at marathon pace, and it feels hard. And for me, it's always that mental thing of, oh, this is going to be so easy, we're only doing 3-minute reps at marathon pace. Marathon pace never feels that easy, especially when you expect it to, and especially when your legs aren't quite fully tapered yet. The taper's weird, like, you always feel great on that marathon race morning and ready to go, legs have never felt so good, but sometimes even 2-3 days out, you still don't feel like you're going to be able to get there. And trust me, you always get there feeling good, you always get there feeling ready to go. I've never ever felt good in the taper, and I always stand on that start line feeling like I could run for hours. You have to just trust the process, do the training in that final week, and kind of immediately forget about it. On the subject of the mentality that comes along with the taper, you have to just control what you can control and try your best to avoid overthinking. I know this is easier said than done because less running equals more time to think, but you have to know the difference between causing stress by overthinking and reducing stress by planning. For example, it's important that you know how you're going to get to the start line. It's important that you know when you're going to take your fuel and what your pace strategy is. But worrying about the fact that you have to get up at 5 AM for a flight and then tossing and turning in bed all night, there's nothing you can do about that. You have to just make the best of that situation. And overthinking and worrying, how's this going to affect my race, is only going to negatively impact the result. Lastly, on things that can affect your mental state in this taper, if something does go wrong in that last 3 weeks, you really just have to make the best decisions, with the only priority being getting to the start line healthy and confident that you can run a marathon. There will probably be phantom niggles and throat scratches, and this is completely normal. But if there's anything that could be considered an injury or an illness, you need to just take a few days off. There's nothing to be gained in this taper, really. We're just trying to get there feeling as good as possible. But sometimes feeling as good as possible means take 3 days off because you're not well. And seriously, you're not going to forgive yourself if you end up standing in that start line unwell or injured because you tried to do an extra few miles in the last week. All the fitness in the world isn't going to mean anything if you need to hobble that last 10 miles. So please just make sure you get to the start line in one piece. So I want to finish off this video by talking about everyone's favourite part of the taper, the carb load. So just a couple of important points here. The first is that you really need to practice this, even if that's just in that long run the week before the race. The first time you've ever carb loaded should not be the day before your marathon race. Second thing, use foods that are familiar. If you eat a lot of rice pudding, have an extra tin of rice pudding in the day. If you like porridge, stick with that. Pasta, rice, etc. Plain foods that you're familiar with, and that should minimise any potential stomach issues. The next thing is that you should be targeting around 10 grams of carbs per kilo of body weight, but look into this for the pace that you're running your marathon. I'm aware that I run marathons pretty quickly, so if you're running 4.5 hours, you're going to need a different amount of carbs from what I would need for a 2:15 marathon. But the principles are still the same. Eat more carbs. Make sure you're really stocking up in that last 24 to 48 hours. Make sure you're familiar with it. And just do everything you can to make sure that carbs are not a limiting factor, because honestly, the marathon's hard enough without that being an issue. That's all I've got in the taper. If you're running a marathon soon, good luck. Just remember that your fitness hasn't gone anywhere in this last 3 weeks, even if you're certain that it has. So believe in yourself, don't do anything daft, and subscribe if you haven't already. Cheers.